Good afternoon, and welcome to Cyber Insurance, What It Covers, How to Apply, and Why You Shouldn't Wait. My name is Amy Slates. I'm a partner and the lead for the professional services practice here at William Vaughn Company, and will be your moderator for today's webinar. Before we begin, I just have a few housekeeping items for you. During the presentation, all participants will be placed in listen-only mode. We ask that you keep your cameras off to reduce disruption. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation using questions submitted via the chat feature. To ask a question at any time during the presentation, simply click on the chat panel in the lower right-hand portion of the screen, type your question, and click the send button. We're going to attempt to get through as many questions as possible, as we'll have somebody monitoring these. Finally, a recording of this webinar will be made available in the coming days. So let's get started. During the past year, ransomware attacks and other cyber breaches have skyrocketed, leading to significant changes in the cyber insurance marketplace. Historically, obtaining cyber insurance was simple, and renewals were a matter of updates based on major changes within an organization. Fast forward to now, and notable shifts in insurance policies and regulations, they're taking shape. Underwriters are now asking for more information relating to cyber controls and IT risk management. Today, we are joined by two talented industry experts who will share their knowledge and provide insights into cyber insurance coverage and what actions your organization will need to get approved. With us today, we have Alex Clark. He's the Vice President of Highland Cyber Practice, where he takes a hands-on approach, not only placing coverage with the correct carrier, but ensuring his clients know how to utilize the policy, how to prevent incidents, minimize payouts, and execute incident response plans come claim time. In addition, Greg Gomach, a senior client executive with DMC Technology Group, brings more than 10 years of experience consulting on digital transformation solutions to meeting his clients' IT needs. Welcome to you all. I'm going to now hand this over to Alex.
Thanks, Amy. Really excited to be here today and talk through the cyber insurance marketplace, and then have my colleague Greg here to really hone in on everything from a technology standpoint. I think it used to be in the past where cyber insurance was on the left and IT and security was on the right, and we were kind of looking at each other from across the aisles. But so quickly we've come to be in the same road, working together to make sure everyone's protected from a risk transfer standpoint, but from a day-to-day security standpoint. So to really set the stage from an insurance perspective, why has everything changed so drastically? Like Amy said, just a couple years ago, it was business name and revenue, and you could have as much cyber insurance as you would like. Now, the market has completely shifted, where we're asking a lot more in-depth questions surrounding controls and really digging into the weeds on what networks and what the security looks like. The reason for that is because cyber crime is its own economy at this point. So every 11 seconds, a new company is hit by ransomware. Ransomware is where a bad actor gets into your system, locks all your systems down, and demands a certain amount of currency, whether that's Bitcoin, Ethereum, or another mode of currency to release your systems. The average ransomware payment, so when they demand a monetary value to release the systems, is about $300,000, which is up 45% just from a year ago. So they're getting their money and they're causing chaos while they're doing it. That specific ransom payment only typically accounts for 10 to 15% of the total incident. So we think of downtime, we think of business interruption, the lost income that these businesses are facing because of these ransomware and cyber events. We think of data restoration, so data that's lost, recreating that data, rectifying that data, all goes into these cyber events. So making sure you have someone like Greg to help you on that side of things, making sure we're backing things up in the appropriate manner, but also having an insurance policy that can provide you the funds and the resources to help on that side of the house as well. 207 days is the average time to identify a breach. So there's this myth out there that these bad actors get in, they take advantage, they get in, they get out right away. A lot of times on the insurance side of the house, we've seen that these bad actors sit there silent. They like to stalk, they like to see when people are going on vacation, they like to see the best way that they can cause chaos to capitalize on that payday for themselves. And then last but not least, it's not always a quick recovery from these data breaches, from these cyber events. 21 days is the average downtime caused by a cyber event or a ransomware attack. So I hope a lot of you are sitting out there thinking 21 days, I'm down for 21 days. What does that equal to from a monetary standpoint? What does that mean for my clients or other third parties or individuals that depend on our business to be up and running? So kind of along the same level of trying to figure out why is this happening? Who is attacking us? What's going on? So really, it's not the 17-year-old kid that's in their mom's basement with their hood up trying to get into businesses. Yes, that happens, but not always. Who is attacking us? Well, we break it down into 4 main categories. We have cyber gangs. They are typically overseas, and they are looking for a big payday. They're looking to hold companies ransom. They're looking to steal very private data that they can utilize to make a dollar. We also have nation state actors. So if you turn on the news, you see this mentioned a lot. This is countries like Russia, North Korea, China that are attacking our businesses. Yes, from a financial standpoint, but also to steal that private data, things like intellectual property, or things that they can utilize to better their businesses. One that gets lost a lot of the time is rogue employees. So when we have layoffs, when we let someone go, or when someone quits because they're frustrated, we want to make sure we take the right steps when releasing them, because we see a lot of claims on the cyber side come from rogue employees, meaning they steal stuff as they go, or they wipe things completely clean on their way out. A cyber policy, we will pick up our own that go rogue. And one that has become very, very popular over the last year or so is political activists that we call activists. Whether they don't agree with what your business is doing, whether they don't agree with maybe you're funding a political agenda, things of that nature, we have seen websites brought down, we've seen websites manipulated, we've seen invoices manipulated to prove a point from a political agenda as well. One question I always get is, when we go through these claims, how do we know if they're good? How do we know if they're bad? Why aren't they punished? And if we're held ransom, should we pay or should we not pay? So we have to believe this or not, these bad actors, they're small businesses. They work 8 to 5, just like we do. They clock in, they clock out, and this is a legal occupation for a lot of these individuals as long as they're hacking outside their country's borders. So a lot of times they get reputations. When you have a cyber claim, you're going to get deployed what we call a forensic expert. That forensic expert knows the ins and outs of all these cyber gangs and nation state actors, and they have what I like to call a Yelp review. Are they good bad actors or are they bad actors? And I know how crazy that is to say, but there's going to be some that release your data if they're paid. There's going to be some that don't. And we want to make sure that we are working with the good ones to make sure that we can retain your data quickly, make sure we can get your businesses back up and running as quickly as possible. Once again, those forensic investigators are always included inside the cyber policy. And it's just another resource that you have in conjunction with your managed service provider and your internal security team. Once again, these bad actors aren't punished because it's a legal occupation. We even see times where they have account managers, where they have online chat rooms that you can negotiate with them. They have sign-offs and they have goals very much like we do. So it's just a completely its own economy, and that's what we're up against. And then should we pay or not pay? A lot easier said than done to answer this question. It's one of these questions that depend on the event, depend on the activist group, but the data breach coach, the forensic experts that are assigned to your case are going to help you walk through that. If we have intact backups, if we can get up and running and get them out of our systems very quickly, we most likely won't pay. If they have our data held hostage and there's no way out, we typically do pay. But there's a lot of checks and balances that go through that process. Are they associated with terrorism? Are there any political agendas or affiliations that we need to take into account to make sure more fines and penalties don't come against our businesses? This is always a time where I say, make sure you just have a really good incident response plan. I know that's something we'll talk about later as far as controls go, But making sure you know who to call, when to call, and what resources you're going to use is very key when making these decisions and answering these questions. So when we talk about business operations, really one of the biggest pieces of cyber insurance is kind of that risk appetite, or what are we actually trying to cover? So on this slide is really questions that me and my team vet with every business we work on. You know, where is your revenue coming from? Is it being generated by web application services, or do we depend on, you know, a website? Do we depend on specific software to drive our revenue? If the answer is yes, we're going to tweak that policy just a little bit, because we have to remember that every cyber policy is just a little bit different than the next. Are we international? Where do our employees sit? Is our distribution and sales international? Do we go to multiple different states? Making sure we're complying with all the different federal and state bodies is part of the cyber policy process as well. We talk a lot about third parties. Do we have access to corporate networks outside of ours? Do people have access to our network? Making sure that we're thinking about those things from a security standpoint, but also from a risk transfer standpoint is key. If we're utilizing those third parties, what level of dependency do we have for them? If we depend on a cloud provider, if we depend on a software provider to make sure we're running at 100%, we really want to beef up certain areas of the cyber policy to make sure that you can recoup and get back up and running quickly. I think the next question, do we have access to private information, is a heavy yes to almost everyone. We're not just worried about credit cards these days. We're not just worried about a social security number. Thinking outside the box of what information we're holding for other third parties. What are we passing on that we may still be liable for is all part of the data review process that we go through. And then last but not least, something that's come on very heavy over the last 12 months is informational technology versus operational technology. IT, things like computers and iPads, things that kind of the front end of the house use to keep things up and running, but operational technology, machinery, things that create products, things that allow us to keep the businesses going and making sure that we can create our products and create our end result are things that we want to look at to potentially separate and make sure that if one side of the house goes down, it doesn't bring the whole business completely down. So what's actually inside the cyber insurance policy? The easiest way to think about this is you have two separate buckets. So you have your first party bucket and your third party bucket. First party costs account for about 80% of all the claims that we see. So making sure we have a very robust first party conditions and clauses inside of our cyber policy are key. Some of the most important items in there is that cyber incident response. So we talked about breach coaches. We talked about forensics, making sure that those are included in the policy at full policy limits. Also included in there are things like public relations. How are we going to tell our employees? How are we going to tell our customers that we've had a cyber event? It's a big piece that a lot of people don't think about when going through this. We want to make sure that that's all protected by attorney-client privilege. We want to make sure that we're not telling too much or too little that could assess fines and penalties down the road. And then things like PCI expenses, we also account that with regulatory fines and penalties, making sure that there's money to defend, making sure that there's money to pay out those assessments. And then making sure that network extortion, so that ransomware claim events not watered down by sublimits or co-insurance, and then making sure we have the money built into the cyber policy to recreate and restore all that data is key. Our third party bucket is really what cyber insurance was founded on. We've lost someone's private information, we've passed malware or virus onto a third party, and they sue us. That third party is going to provide you all the funds to defend that claim, but also go to court and pay out any assessments that come from that. The nice bell and whistle that we have is media liability coverage. So everyone has a website out there. If someone claims defamation from a cyber standpoint, from commercial things of that nature that we're posting, media liability is also a nice bell and whistle when it comes to these cyber policies. A lot of little writing, a lot of numbers, a lot of big words on this slide. So one thing I just really want to stress is that every cyber policy is different. So whoever you're utilizing from an insurance perspective, we really encourage you to break down that coverage and really decide, all right, is this coverage, is this limit adequate? This is an example of one that we've recently seen that we kind of don't agree with. So we've talked a lot about notification costs. We've talked a lot about public relations and that data response. This specific policy only has $500,000 in coverage for that. That's a very low sublimit. We like to see that at least $1 million. Business interruption has a 20% co-insurance on this specific policy. What does that mean? That means for every X amount of dollars that you're losing, you're on the hook for 20% of that, and the insurance company is only going to pay the 80% of the loss. That's not acceptable. We want to make sure that you're getting the exact limit that you've signed up for and that you're paying for, and there's no cargebacks. What's a retro date? A retro date is when the policy starts, and that anything happened before that date is not going to be covered. Like I said, it takes about 200 plus days to find a cyber criminal in your network. So making sure that that policy is going to cover before they got into your system and after they got into your system is key. This specific policy has no cyber crime. So things like social engineering, invoice manipulation, someone getting into your bank account, siphoning money out of it. That's not going to be picked up here. And that's probably the #1 claim we see outside of ransomware is people getting duped and wiring thousands of dollars to a fraudulent third party. We see about 3 to 4 of those on any given week. And then hardware replacement, a lot of times, and I'm sure Greg can agree with this, is that bad actors love to render hardware completely useless. So your cell phones, your computers, your iPads, things of that nature, your servers, bad actor can completely scramble them and make them just a very expensive paperweight. So making sure that there's money built in to replace that hardware is key. And then we get into a very gray area. Are these bad actors considered terrorists? Are they considered to be affiliated with terrorism? Making sure that there's just no gray wording surrounding that, making sure that we know it's officially going to be covered, no matter who the bad actor is and where they're coming from. So my last slide here before I pass it off to Greg to really start to break down kind of the security side of things and what you can do. And this is where our worlds really come together. When we're planning for the future and you're planning to put a cyber management program in place, this is what every insurance underwriter is going to be looking at from your application. Multi-factor authentication is really the ticket to get into the game and be qualified for a good cyber policy. But things like endpoint detection and response, monitoring your computers, monitoring your devices for any weird and malicious activity, making sure we have strong backups. Email filtering and web security. So this is one that I always like to circle. 80% of cyber claims that we see in the insurance marketplace are from human error. That means people clicking on links. That means people giving credentials out to fraudulent websites. So rather than having those people be at the mercy of discovering if that email is real, trying to filter as much of the fraudulent and the malicious activity out of those inboxes is key. Patch management. A lot of us have iPhones, Android phones. We get updates all the time. We want to make sure that we're updating our computers and our servers in real time as well. One thing that we've seen a lot in the insurance marketplace is digital supply chain attacks, where a bad actor will get at the top of the mountain and affect thousands of companies at one time. So making sure we're patching those devices up so we really put the curtain up so the bad actor can't get in. Highlighted this on a couple slides ago, incident response planning and testing. So making sure that we're putting the plan together, making sure we're putting a group of individuals inside of our businesses to know who to call, when to call, and how we're going to move forward once an event takes place. Always a good note is to make sure that incident response plan is offline, making making sure you have a hard copy because you're not going to be able to access it if a bad actor takes your network down or locks all your systems. In conjunction with that email filtering and web security, employee training. Training a keen eye to make sure we know what to look for. Why is that link a little bit malicious? Did I look at the sender? Is it .com or is it .com.o? Making sure that we're looking for those little nuances that a cyber event can come from. And then service accounts with limited domain privileges. What I'm trying to get to here is making sure that not everyone has full access to the network. I don't have access to HR documents at Highland. I don't have access to our firewalls and backups. I'm very isolated just to the data that I need. So making sure we're only giving people access to what is really needed to do their jobs at 100%. As I said in the past, insurance and security were on two separate sides, running two different roads. Now we're combined. So this is a perfect time for me to segue into Greg and let him talk really about security and how his work can really apply to insurance, but also protect you with alternative controls.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. And you can stay right here for a minute, even before you move on to my slide if you want to, just to kind of reiterate some things that maybe we've been seeing, not only with our customers, but just that you might be seeing on the news even at the end of the day. Some of the reasons for attacks that we talk about that have been hidden here, but that we see are just general misconfigurations that you might have in your environment. Someone that doesn't know best practices that might be going on. We have a team of people that are dedicated to individual aspects of a technology to make sure that we understand how these need to be configured. And any third party that you work with from a consulting side should be able to help you through those kinds of things. Like you mentioned, human error is a huge one. That is the biggest attack vector that we see nowadays, whether it's coming through email, maybe a sprinkling of flash drives in a parking lot that someone thinks is fun to plug in. All those things happen from time to time. And if you're not training your users or your employees at the end of the day so that they're prepared and able to stop those things from happening, you're really setting yourself up for failure, unfortunately. Poor maintenance in general, that's part of the patch management that we see. A lot of times systems are neglected. IT administrators, whoever it may be, just don't have the time to take care of that between all the other items that they're dealing with users or trying to help the business stay up and running. Patching just gets left to the wayside. And that's one of the worst things you can do. For example, Microsoft puts out patches multiple times a day for security items when they need to help keep environments safe. And it's simple. It's something that you're already paying for. It's included with your Windows license. Just keep them patched. Another one is unknown items that we might have on the network that you don't know about. It's very easy for a disgruntled employee or someone that's walking around in the environment with a clipboard that looks like they know what they're doing to plug something into a wall jack at the end of the day. A lot of times in my past experience, I've been able to walk into a building and it looks like I know where I'm going and everybody just pretty much leaves you alone. It's surprising how easy that is to just kind of walk around. And if I wanted to, and I don't, but if I wanted to, you could certainly plug something in that would start scanning the network, looking for places to get to, and then reporting that back to a malicious actor. Finally, one of the big things, and this goes with endpoint detection and response, the EDR, it's just low visibility in general of your environment. What's going on with your network? What's going on with your workstations and servers, all of your equipment? If you don't have a visibility into it, that's where you run into, hey, it's been 207 days since this person has been in our environment. That's scary to think about. What are they doing with your data? What are they doing with your intellectual property? And sometimes they get in and they leave and they don't even do ransomware or anything like that. They're just stealing things from companies at the end of the day in order to sell it. So having the visibility to make sure that everything's monitored in a single place, all of your logging is sent back to one spot, is a huge deal nowadays. And that's all part of managed endpoint detection and response. You can pop to the next slide now, Alex, if you want to, but the kind of stance that we've taken is we've come up with a checklist here, and I'm not going to go over each individual thing, but some of the heavy hitters. But we've kind of taken a stance of it's not really a matter of if it's going to happen to you or someone you know, but when at this point. It's just so prevalent nowadays that you need to have a lot of layers to your security, and one of those is having a response plan to that we've talked about. So one of the big things that you can do right now for your environments that you have sitting there is testing that plan and doing a security assessment with a third party. Someone that's not readily in the environment is a great place to start. They don't have those rose-colored glasses at the end of the day saying, oh yeah, I meant to get to that one in a couple of days, and it just gets left to the wayside as other things pop up. If you have a third party come in, everything's going to be documented. Everything's going to be written down, from what patch levels you're on to vulnerabilities that might be found from the outside in, inside out. All those kinds of things are looked at, and it's a great document to have in front of you. We specifically have a checklist that we go through with everybody. It shows high, medium, and low priorities, all the good things that you'd be looking for. And again, a lot of third parties out there offer this kind of an assessment, and it's a great place to start if you're not already on the journey. If you already are on that journey, I know some vendors are starting to require that you perform some sort of a security assessment, whether that's a cyber insurance company or that you're working through, or if you have vendors that you work with that require you to show this kind of information. It's starting to become more and more prevalent in the IT world at the end of the day. One big piece nowadays too are passwords. In the past, the big deal was, hey, let's just change those passwords every 30 days. It's a big deal. Let's get them done. No big deal. That's changed. They've taken a different stance on things where they need to be longer. You're looking for the 12 to 16 character kind of world. It's kind of a hard thing and an annoying thing to remember, but it protects you so much more, and it doesn't have to be as changed as often. Every 6 months to a year, if you have a great password, is good enough, especially if you couple that with two-factor authentication, or you're looking at things like conditional access, for example, that's offered by Microsoft, where, hey, this looks kind of funny. I'm not in the office. I better prompt this user for multi-factor authentication. So they're not constantly hit with it. You can come up with conditions for that to happen. It's a great way to help protect yourself. And there's also different ways to set up and install something like multi-factor authentication. It shouldn't just be a push notification anymore where you just click yes. There should be a prompt for the user to enter something proving that they're at the phone more or less, and that's who they are, because there are man-in-the-middle attacks where they can kind of grab those things and work their way through them. Go ahead and go to the next slide there. Another piece that I know Alex hit on, but is a big one, is making sure that you're doing some sort of advanced email protection. Spam filtering just isn't enough anymore. We all have spam, no matter what. Everything gets through sooner or later. If you crank it up too much, you stop getting any emails. But going beyond that and making sure you have something that's scanning links and attachments that might be coming through the email is huge. There are a ton of products out there that do that. If you're on Office 365, for example, it's included in a lot of the subscriptions that they have. So you may already have it and maybe it's not being utilized. But it's a great way to make sure that as something arrives to the user, it's scanned beforehand. So if it's malicious, it just strips that piece right off and it still delivers the message. But it'll have a little note saying, hey, we noticed something funky. Your IT admin's been notified and we've taken this attachment or this link out of it. It also goes a little bit further on the 365 or Microsoft route, where it'll look inside Word documents for links as well, which is another great step to help keep people safe. Is if you're sharing something internally and you have a malicious employee that's put something in there, it's scanned as they open those kinds of things. And finally, for me, probably one of the other big ones is something with a lifecycle management, making sure that you're keeping up with replacing hardware as it's needed. We shoot for, on the server side, about every 5 years, you should be looking at recycling and putting in some new hardware. And that's not so much just because it's really around the fact that security changes for this hardware. A lot of people don't think about security being hardware related, but all the new processors, all the new chipsets, all those things have security on them to help keep you safe and help keep malicious actors away. Not to mention, as things age, patches aren't put out as much by the vendors at the end of the day, or it's just been forgotten. So that's another big one that is not easily done, but it's budgetable. If you keep that budgeted in the back of your mind, every 5 years, we need to make sure that we're replacing our equipment, taking a look at what we can move, maybe off-prem to save some money. That's just good practice at that. And that's pretty much everything I had.
We do have a few questions. If you have some more, just send them in as I'm going over the couple that we have. One of them was, Alex, how does a business owner know if their broker is the right one for cyber insurance?
It's a good question. I think the slide deck really broke it down. Those are the kind of things that your broker really should be asking you for. One thing that we always look at, and my team always looks at, is adequacy of coverage. Are we getting unique with what we're looking for? Are we giving you the right limit? I utilize a lot of tools and resources to help benchmark where cyber coverage should be purchased at, meaning what the limit is. But really, it's talking about the assets and digging into those questions with you on slide 3 that I had of where's your exposure, how are we going to cover it, and what can the policy do for you?
Okay. Another one was, how long after a breach occurs do you have to report it without losing coverage?
Another great question. So almost every policy reads as soon as practicable. So you have an event, your system's locked down, or even if there's just something that's acting a little funny, we want to make sure that we're notifying the insurance carrier as soon as possible. I always like to highlight this, that your cyber insurance policy doesn't act like your auto policy per se. You get in a little fender bender, your rates might go up. The way that the cyber insurance companies look at this is if you notify them early and nothing's there, no harm, no foul. But we'd rather be notified early because we can minimize the claims, not let a $10,000 claim turn into $1 million claim. So proactive nature is really key with these policies.
Yeah. And we have one from Jason. Which types of payment fraud are not covered? For example, counterfeit checks, wires initiated from a spoofed email.
Yeah, so I think a very comprehensive cyber policy or a crime policy, 2 different versions that we typically combine together for e-crime, all of that's going to be covered in some way or another. I would challenge you more to make sure that you're asking your current broker, why wouldn't a funds transfer fraud or why wouldn't a social engineering be covered with my current policy? Because carriers do like to provide certain wording where if you're not getting a dual signature, if you're not having a callback procedure, or we're not, making sure that we're reaching out to certain people on the other side, then there's no coverage. So really making sure you know the nuances of how that coverage is actually working, rather than just saying, is it covered, is it not? What are the details surrounding it?
Okay. And Greg, how can businesses educate their employees to reduce issues?
Yes, there's quite a few products out there that kind of help handle this. One that we use is a product called KnowBe4, and it takes care of kind of picking and choosing what and how your users are going to be educated. So they have a lot of different videos or what do you call multiple choice kind of questions that they go through, and training where you're looking at an actual email and it will show you kind of red flags as you're going through it, like, hey, this is malicious because of XYZ. So part of it is they go through and send out a test email to either some of your users. We say send it to everybody and let's see how you do. Part of it comes back to you. You have a whole list of the users that maybe clicked on something they shouldn't have. And thankfully it was just a test, and that provides them training based on what they clicked on, where they went wrong and how they can improve their score more or less week over week and month over month. It's a real easy way. There's not a lot of administration behind it. It's a really set it and forget it kind of thing.
I think I covered all of them that were in there. I want to thank you, Alex and Greg, for your insights. It was very helpful. That concludes our webinar today. We do have a poll that we are launching that we ask that you answer a few questions. It helps us do future seminars. So if you could answer the polling questions, that would be great. I'd like to thank the panelists for their insights. I would also like to thank you for your time and your interest in this topic. The presentation materials will be made available to you in the coming day. Please keep an eye out for any correspondence from us with a link to the recording. And if you have any questions, I encourage you to reach out to us. All of our contact information will be in the follow-up correspondence. And we definitely have more webinars in the works, so look for details about upcoming events soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.